scran and blether, scran and blether. Come on in, scran and blether, scran and blether. Welcome to good food and good chat. Come have a chat.
Well, I'm here in the kitchen, and this is going to be the first recipe that I'm going to post here at Scran and Blether. Scran and Blether because scran obviously is a good Scottish word for food, a passion of mine, and blether because my second favourite thing to do in the world besides eating is talking. So there'll be a bit of blether as I produce some scran. The reason why I'm making my first recipe is just traditional cheese scones. Scones, we call them scones, is because when I was young, I was always in the kitchen with my mother, who was a very good cook and baker, all homemade, a good home cook and home baker, I should say, not professional. Taught by my wee granny, wee Greta from Glasgow. She was a feisty little 5 foot nothing, 6 stone woman that you wouldn't cross. So she taught my mother and my mother taught me, and I was always in the kitchen, always learning how to make things at home. And so I figured that although probably some of the first recipes that I ever helped my mother to make, and she had me in the kitchen with her showing me, and I was part of producing stuff in the kitchen and enjoying baking with my mother. It was very bonding. The first recipe that I made from start to finish on my own, under her supervision, but that was no hands-on from anyone other than me, was cheese scones. So first few recipes I've ever made with help has been things like fairy cakes and little jam cakes and things like that, which I will make because they hold a great deal of nostalgia for me, and tray bakes, which is another favourite. But the first recipe that I made on my own from scratch and felt very proud of myself as a young girl was cheese scones. And on that, the cheese scones that I made came from Mrs. Beaton's cookbook. And for years I thought Mrs. Beaton was like my hero, Mary Berry. Dame Mary Berry. I thought Mrs. Beaton was like a Mary Berry. And it was years and years later that I actually discovered, in a sense, she was a bit of a fraud. She was a real person, but she was a publisher. And in the 1800s and something, I think she actually passed away very young at 1865, after she developed a fever after childbirth. Very sad, very, very sad. But for years I've referred to Mrs. Beaton's cookbook, and I have it here. I found it in a cupboard to look out now. I know the cheese scone recipe off by heart now, so I don't have to look at it, but this was my original recipe. And so the book, it is tattered, absolutely tattered. I found it in a cupboard, and this was from, I think, 1963 or something like that. So this was my mum's, and she passed it on to me. Yeah, 1963, and reprinted in 1973. And this would have been right because my mother would have been a new wife with a young girl, me, at that age, because I was born in 71. So she probably brought this with her from my granny's to her first marital home. Or bought it. No, she would have bought it when she actually already had her first marital home, because my parents got married in 1970. So yeah, so she would have bought this when she was a housewife and mother, and passed it on to me, and it's treasured. And there's still recipes in it that are very relevant, actually. You know, you can just Google anything these days. But yeah, so it's the original recipe for the plain scones, but I make plain cheese scones, and that's what we're going to make. So I should say that normally I would make them with fresh milk. Today I don't actually have any fresh milk in the house, so I'm using buttermilk as a substitute. which will just be fine. It'll be absolutely fine. So let's get started. So I've pre-measured some of the stuff just to save from boredom. I have, now the original recipe here is in ounces, so I'm going with ounces, and usually when I bake it, it's in grams. In the UK we use grams, so this is pre-sifted flour, but I still like to sift it. So it's a pound or 16 ounces of plain flour. You can do the same recipe with self-raising flour, you just change the leavening agents. So we'll just sift this, which will take no time because it is pre-sifted, but I just like to do it anyway because it keeps everything nice and light. And so there we have it, that's our pound or 16 ounces of plain flour. And into that, the original recipe would say 4 to 6 teaspoons of baking powder, or you can mix between baking soda, baking powder, or baking soda, cream of tartar. And because I'm using buttermilk and there's some reaction, some chemical reaction with buttermilk, I am going to use a mixture of baking powder and a teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda. Normally I would just do the level teaspoons of baking powder, and I'm putting that through the sieve. So I think I'll do 4 to 6 they say, and I usually do like 4 or 5. You don't want to taste the raisin agent, it's not nice. So I will do maybe 3 of those, and a little bicarbonate of soda just because of the buttermilk. But if it's fresh milk, I'd probably just stick to the baking powder. And also you can do it with self-raising flour and just 1 teaspoon of baking powder, I think it would be. So yeah, so that will go in there. There's your raisin agent. Sifted because, yeah, you get little lumps. And that's in there. Okay. 2 minutes. I have to preheat my oven to 200 degrees. How silly of me. So 200 degree fan oven. That is it. 1 second. Am I back? Yes, I'm back. I just had to blow my nose there and I didn't want to do it in camera. So you mix your dry ingredients together. I just really like to get my hands in, so I'll just mix it in with my hands. So the dry ingredients is mixed together. You could add half a teaspoon of salt, a pinch of salt. I'm not doing it because I am going to use salted butter. So that's the first part of the ingredients. And the second part of the ingredients is, a second, I haven't brought them out of the fridge. Here we go. Real life, real time. So I have, now you can use all butter or all lard, but I'm using half butter and half lard. This is 3 ounces in total, so 1.5 ounces of each. I cut it into small cubes, makes it easier to rub in. And for anyone who's very new to bakery or cookery, rubbing in just means the way you rub it in with your fingers, and I'll show that. So we have, I'll recap the ingredients at the end. I'm just saying them as I go and then I'll recap them in. So this all gets thrown in here in all the little cubes. It just makes it easier when you're rubbing it in, because you want to rub it in and have it looking like sandy, breadcrumby kind of sand. So you would just do that with your fingers. So the tips of your fingers, the palms of your hand should stay clean. The tips of your fingers, and the key to good scones and pastry and things like that is that it doesn't get hot. So I use the mixture of lard and butter. So you can use all of one or all of the other. I used to be a vegetarian for many years and I would not have used lard, but I feel that the fat, it works. It was what my mum originally done, and then when I became vegetarian and really fussy, she changed it for me, but our original recipe was half and half. Half and half. Fat for flavour. So rubbing it in, so you're gripping it in your finger and you're sort of rubbing your thumb across the top of your fingers, and that's what rubs the butter and fat into the flour to create the texture that you want once it's all rubbed in. So I'll do this in real time, but obviously you can skip it until it's done. So excuse my little talisman there's banging off the bowl. That might be quite annoying for people to hear. So continue. It really doesn't take long. You can pretty much make these scones from start to finish within half an hour. I did obviously have the fat pre-prepared, cut it into small cubes and put it in the fridge. Unusually for this time of year, it's actually quite hot and sunny today in Ayrshire. So yeah, it's not like the Scottish weather to be in any way predictable. I think the forecast was actually rain, but there you go. So anyway, the reason I'm being really boring and talking about the weather is that the temperature can affect your bakery when it comes to your ingredients melting on the counter, but also how cakes rise and how they cool and all of that stuff. So something to bear in mind. So I cut the fat up and put it on a little plate and put it back in the fridge until I was ready to use it. I'll just get that prepared so that it's not sitting out while I do anything else, and just have it exactly when I need it. You don't need to be so careful like that with buttermilk because it doesn't need to be frozen. It doesn't need to be really cold for this. It doesn't need to be cold. In fact, if you're using buttermilk when you're baking, it's actually better if it's sat out and left at room temperature, along with your butter and your eggs and everything. When you're baking, baked goods mix so much better when they're at room temperature. So it's a little tip. It really does affect the quality. So still rubbing in, still taking a little while. As I say, I'm not adding some salt to this. You could if you like salt, but that I'm using cheese is quite salty, and I'm using a mature, actually extra mature Scottish cheddar I am using. You can use any cheese, you can use any cheese you like. If you like Gruyere or if you like a milder cheese, yeah, you can use whatever cheese you like. I really like Scottish cheddar, it's my favourite cheese. I like lots of cheese, lots of different cheese, big fan of cheese. But for these scones, can you beat a bit of Scottish cheddar? And I use extra mature. Mature or extra mature. Today I happen to have extra mature. Now, what I will say about when you use mature cheese, you know, when you go buying cheese, you might think it's quite expensive. And I think to buy a milder cheese is false economy because you just need a lot less of it when you use the mature one. So I would always go for a mature and extra mature. But then I really like it strong as well. And when it's in a scone, you don't want to lose the flavour. You want to taste the cheesiness. If it's a cheese scone, you really want to taste the cheese. So that's it all rubbed in. It now resembles sort of sand, fine breadcrumb. That's what it resembles. So that's that. And then make a kind of little well in the middle. And I will, actually you can add the cheese at this point if you wanted to, or put the milk in and then I'll add the cheese. I'll put the dry ingredients in together. So you would add most of this cheese. This is, the recipe calls for 4 to 6 ounces of cheese. I grate 6 and I use most of it. I maybe keep an ounce by because I like to sprinkle cheese on the top of the scones once they've been brushed with some switched up egg. Right, so I'm leaving about that amount, and I obviously have my cheese pre-grated, so just mixing that through with my fingers into the flour mixture. It's all evenly distributed. I've done it the other way. I've put the milk in and then the cheese in before. It still works as well. So I've made a little well in the middle, and then what I do is pour this milk in all at once. It's half a pint, and then because I like to keep it cold, my hands now have got a little warm. I would run them under the cold tap in a minute. I just start bringing it together with a knife, metal, because it keeps it cool. Start to combine it with my knife. As I say, I normally just use whole milk for this. I don't usually use buttermilk. I think the only difference it'll make is the scones might be a little bit softer. I'm not sure if they'll rise as well, but we'll see. So mixing all this in, it should combine quite well together. And if it doesn't, you can add a tiny little bit more mixture, but I would just, liquid, sorry. I would just be careful because you don't want it really wet and heavy and doughy. It should be light and springy, and it should be handled as little as possible. So that's now pretty much coming together. I'm just going to rinse my hands under cold water for a minute because I'm going to handle it. And my hands feel kind of warm. To say it's a warm day today. Weird. So I will just put a little dusting flour on my surface. I'm going to roll it out. Dusting the flour on the rolling pin. Dusting the flour on my cutter. And before I roll it out and start to cut it, I'm just going to switch up this little egg. And if you're trying to economise, you don't have to use egg. You can just use, you could stick your fingers in the container you've had your milk in. You can stick your fingers in there and just rub the tops of the scones with the little bit of milk that's left. I'm just switching up an egg because I happen to have a few eggs. I bought lots of eggs that were reduced, so I'm going to have to make more cake. It's an excuse to make more cake. Right, so now I'm going to bring this together with my hand. It should come away. I'll try and do it with one hand, so I've got one clean hand. It should come away from the sides pretty well. There's one big pile of dough. And I knead it slightly, but as I say, you should really be handling it as little as possible. As little as possible, and then a bit went flying. There we go. So yeah, it's coming away from the bowl quite well. As I say, with little handling. Right, and you'll see this. Here we are. A big dough ball. It's moist, it's not dry at all. It's quite sticky. And there's still a little bit in, and I'll add that. So I'm setting this on top of a lightly floured surface because we don't want it to stick. And I'll just grab a little bit of what's left in here because I waste nothing. There we go. That's it. That's all of that. Set that aside. A bit of cheese. A bit of cheese in there. Yeah, we'll set that aside out of the way. And then hopefully you can see, kind of rolled it into a ball here. I'm just going to scrape this off my fingers with the back of this knife. Right, and then roll it out. Roll it out, turn a little, roll a little, turn a little. If your rolling pin starts to stick, just put another little dusting of flour on it. Mine is okay at this point. So there we go. Don't need to be perfect at all. Right, so, and then get my cutter. Now, when you're cutting scones, you just want to go straight down and straight back up. Don't twist. It affects the rise of the bake. So that's one cut out perfectly. The funny thing is when I'm doing this now, sometimes I roll them too thin and then, or too thick, and then I don't get it. I try to get a dozen. Back before I even bought cutters, I just used to use an upturned glass, and the glass that I used was absolutely perfect. It was my favourite glass, and it was a perfect size, and I got a perfect baker's dozen, 13, and then I smashed it. You get used to these things that happen to be your favourites, and then when you smash one, it's just never the same again. So I just got used to knowing exactly what thickness to roll it out to get my perfect baker's dozen from the size of my glass that I used as a cutter. Because when I started, I didn't have anything. I didn't have any of the fancy equipment. I didn't have, I pretty much bought my tubs and all of that, my bowls and everything from like a discount shop, pound shop they call them, and that's plastic. So I've cut out as much as I can. I have to squeeze this back together and roll it to cut more, but say try not to handle it too much. You don't want it to start like breaking apart. If it does, you just add a tiny bit of liquid, so pull it back together just from your fingers. So this is okay, it's coming back together. Re-roll a tiny bit. You know, even if you didn't have a rolling pin, you could pretty much pat it down with your fingers. Getting another one. I'm not sure how many that is. Let's see. Getting another one. I might get one more sneaky one. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, I'm going to get a dozen. There'll be one odd shaped one. This will be the cook's pleasure. Because if it's slightly bigger than the rest, it'll be the bonus one. Right, so I'm just rolling this with my fingers. There's no point in even trying to put it back in the cutter. There we go. An odd shaped one. Roughly the same size, maybe slightly bigger. So that worked out quite well. So you want to put them in where they've got, you don't need to have a lot of space because you want them to rise up the way. So now, let's bring this closer. Here they are on the tray, on a baking tray, baking sheet. You could put parchment paper down, but they tend not to stick, they tend to be okay. And then I'll just brush these, brush the top of these with a little bit of egg. Only the top, don't go down the sides, the top only. If you go down the sides, your scones won't rise. And I have made that mistake. I have completely made that mistake. Thinking, oh, I'll be really generous and I'll cover them all in the egg and they'll be all nice and crispy on the outside, because the little egg wash gives the top a little, like a slight little crispiness to it. And it makes the nice golden toasty colour. It just looks really appealing and delicious. So you just do that, top only, and then sprinkle a little more cheese on the top, which you also don't have to do. I just like it. I think it leaves a nice little interesting look about it in the top, and a little bit more sort of crust or whatever with the cheese. It's nice. We'll just do that quickly. So this whole thing is I've probably taken a bit longer than I would usually take, but I usually have these prepped within 15 minutes, and then they go in the oven. So say I have it at 200 fan, and ran out of cheese. 200 fan for about another 15 minutes. I usually set my timer on my phone. I need to get a kitchen timer. Set my timer on my phone for about 13 minutes and just have a little peek, and it usually takes 14 or 15 minutes to actually look. See, I've been doing them that long that I know by the look of them if they're ready. What you do to check if they're ready is when you take them out of the oven, you lift one upside down and tap the bottom. If when it taps it sounds kind of hollow, then you know they're cooked through. I'm just rubbing a little bit of cheese off a couple of the tops of a couple of these because I haven't kept enough. So it only needs a little sprinkle anyway, it's fine. And it doesn't even need them, so if you're being frugal and you really don't have a lot of money, they're still tasty with the smaller amount of cheese, the 4 ounces instead of 6 ounces, and you don't have to top them. It's really entirely up to yourself. So these are ready to go in the oven, and we'll see them when they're done. So the scones are ready to come out of the oven, so let's see. Hope they've risen as good as they usually do. Here we are. Oh, looking golden toasty. Yes. They look right. The tap test will tell all. How lovely do they look? Okay, I'm just going to sit them on here and then I will tap. That has a hollow tap. They sound ready to me. I'm just going to tap another couple just to make sure. Yep. Yep. Yes. They're sounding ready. So that was 14 minutes. Yeah, 14 minutes in a 200-degree fan oven. Now, ovens vary, so you never know. So what I'll do now is I'll put these on a cooling rack. I wouldn't cut into them immediately straight away because they'll fall apart. So you can still eat them while they're still warm, but I will just leave them a few minutes just so that they don't, it's when you try and cut them and butter them, you would just make a mess. So we'll put them here, let them cool for a few minutes, and then we'll cut one open and show you the inside. So they came away not bad from the tray. So I never usually have a problem. Here they are, delicious cheesy scones. Lovely with a bit of butter, or a little bit of ham. Even soft cream cheese would be nice on them. And what I say about scones is they are always the most delicious the day that they're baked. The freshest, the most delicious. So you have this outside layer of a slight crispiness, and inside will be like super soft and just so yummy. And so what I would say is once they're cool, to keep that same day freshness, I would put like, not maybe a terry towel, but a tea towel that's like cloth tea towel, and lie that over the top of them just in the first day, and they'll keep that sort of crisp top, soft inside freshness. And then if it gets to the end of the day and you haven't eaten them all, I would then put them in an airtight container in a tin. You could put them in a plastic freezer bag or something. I'm trying not to use plastic as much in my life anymore, so I would put them in a tin, an airtight tin. And the next day the outside doesn't have that crisp, it goes softer. And obviously they're not as fresh, but they're still as equally delicious the next day. I particularly like them. You could throw them back in the oven for a minute or two and it would refreshen and it would revitalise them. But I don't think it's worth going to the expense of heating up your oven to do that. They're also equally nice the next day toasted. So you would cut it in half and either stick it in your toaster and toast them and put a bit of butter on, or another filling, or toast them under the grill. You know, cut it in half and do your outsides under the grill, then turn them round and put another little bit of grated cheese on and melt the cheese. I'd love to do that the next day with a bit of melted cheese and some thin slices of cherry tomato on top, or a little bit of ham or something. So they're lovely that way for a lunch. Usually when I make these, I make them on a Saturday morning and we have them for breakfast on a Saturday morning. And then maybe Sunday for lunch, if we get up a little later, we maybe have them as a brunch, toasted with fillings as a way. But they don't usually last, because when anyone knows I'm making them, they usually appear. It's like they have a sense, a sixth sense of when the baking is going. Or I'll put some in a bag and give them to my dad or whoever. I'm always making things and distributing it out. As I say, my two big passions, aside from eating and talking, is making it in the first place. And I think the nicest thing you can do for anyone is to feed them. It's a way of sharing the love and try and put that love into the food. So I think a few minutes has passed. I think we could cut into one of these. It might still be a little bit soft yet, but let's do, just to let you see. I'll just grab a knife and a little bit of butter. Get the good butter out for this. It's been in the fridge, it's quite hard, so the good butter is a fancy butter from a local supermarket that has Malden sea salt and Somerset cream in it, and this nice salted butter I'm going to try and put on here. I'm so can't wait. I'm just going to slice this butter down because this has been in the fridge, so it'll be just cut it into like a thin slice like that and lie it on, and the heat of the scone will do the rest. I'll just get a little plate for that scone. Should have done that and been prepared, but there you go. Real housewife making real life mistakes. Here we are. So, what one will I pick? What looks the best? What looks the best? I think I'll take the odd shape one. Right, so, well, good scones usually just break open in the middle, but it's still hot. It's too soon. If I let them cool completely, I could probably just do that and it would break in a natural half. But I'm going to have to use the knife here. Here we go. Yeah, it's still very hot. It's probably going to crumble and fall apart in my impatience to show you how it's going. So nice and cooked, but it's still really warm. So I'll just slide that thin bit of butter on the top, and it's melting as we speak. So there we go. It's still too hot. I should have maybe waited. I've been a little bit impatient there just to get the taste test done and get the show the goods. And the butter's melting. Melting. There we go. I'm actually starving. Here we are. Can you hear the little crisp on the outside? Absolutely. Gulp. Delicious. Really, really nice. You hear the crunch? There's a little toasty crunch on the top with that little bit extra cheese. And the egg wash and a little bit extra cheese just adds that little extra. Well, I better go and give my husband a shout because he's in the living room watching TV and said he was hungry, so these will be welcome. So yeah, I would say these are so easy to make. Anyone can do it. What I would like to do is, one celebrity chef that I really like, actually, I've been to see a couple of times, James Martin, would always say, use the best quality ingredients you can, use the best flour you can, use, all of that. And whilst a lot of the time I do agree, I would like to put that to the test because we can't always afford all the best of. Yeah, use the best you can afford, absolutely. But do you have to? So I remember growing up and making these, and it was just generic flour and anything you had. And that was the beauty of making things like scones and fairy cakes and buns, was when you had very little and not a lot of money, you could make these things for cheap. So I think what I would like to do is remake these 2 lots and do 1 lot with the basics, supermarket basics or whatever basics, cheapest flour I can get, well, just cheap anyway, cheapest flour, cheapest butter, cheapest cheese, and cheapest milk, everywhere I can find the cheapest of everything, and then buy all the same ingredients again as the top of the line of each one, the expensive flour, the expensive butter, the expensive, and make both batches, and then give someone a blind taste test to come in and taste them and give it a mark out of 10 and see if it's worth the extra cost, and I'll cost it out. What do you think of that idea? I actually had thought of doing that with a few different things, a few different dishes, and see if, do we really have to pay a premium for things to be delicious? I think not. I do think there's certain things that you can't scrimp on, that is false economy. When I say like extra mature cheddar, you need less of it, and yeah, you need less of it, so you save money in the long run. But do we have to pay the premium and get the best quality of everything for it to taste delicious, for it to turn out delicious? What I would say about today is it was a mid-range flour I used. My baking soda and baking powder were a little bit more expensive because I bought them in tins, because I'm trying not to buy things in plastic, as I have said. But you can get much cheaper in plastic containers from the well-known cheaper supermarkets. So that can be done, and I'm not opposed to that. I think people have to do what they can afford. I'm choosing to try and eliminate plastic for my health, because I believe it's toxic, and the pollution of it and all of that moral stuff, and that's me, that's my personal preference, and I'm going to do that, and I'm really fortunate enough that I can afford to do that. But for the purposes of the experiment, I would buy the cheaper one and just see. And it's for people who can't afford, because some people say, they can't afford to make nutritious, healthy food, and I believe that that's not true. You can make nutritious, healthy food, but I am aware that nutritious, healthy ingredients are often more expensive. But I think there's always ways around it, and I'm going to try and find them for various recipes that I make. And some of the recipes I make are a little bit more luxurious, always simple though, but are a little bit more luxurious in terms of price of ingredients. And there are other things I make that are super cheap and really delicious. So I intend to try and do that and bring interest, and hopefully you'll stay interested and enjoy and try and make and really enjoy what you're going to cook, because I think these scones are absolutely delicious. They're so tasty, very Moorish, very, very Moorish. So make them, let me know what you think, and enjoy. And I'm going to scoff the rest of this scran.
Scran and blether, scran and blether, scran and blether, come on in. Scran and blether, welcome to good food and good chat.